Hey guys, how's it going? Wanted to talk to you today about fertilizer. So welcome, this is Seed to Plate, an urban gardening channel. My name is Brooke, and I just share things I learn about gardening as I make mistakes and do all the things. I think fertilizer is something that can get really confusing. Whether you're new or somewhat of a seasoned gardener, I think there's just a lot of information out there, and so I wanted to share what I do and the way I think about fertilizer, because it can definitely be a little bit of a hot topic. So first things first, let's talk about why you would use fertilizer. Before I started gardening, or in my first garden at an apartment like 4 or 5 years ago, I remember talking to my sister and I'm like, well, like soil and dirt are the same thing. Now that I'm a much more experienced gardener, I can tell you for sure soil and dirt are not the same things. Dirt is dead. Soil is alive with microbes and fungus and all these microbiomes and earthworms and bugs, and good soil that's been well developed has its own ecosystem, and that's part of what feeds the roots of your plants so that your plants grow and you get either the leaves or the roots or the fruit or whatever part of the plant you're eating. So that's why we fertilize. Now, there are ways of building up your dirt into soil. There are ways of building up your soil. Those things usually happen slowly over time. So for example, my garden bed at my community garden plot I've been tending to for about 2 years. So I put fresh compost on it every 6 months. I try not to disturb the soil as much as I can. I mulch. So that soil has been developed for a couple of years. This soil in my backyard has only been developed for 7 months. It's not that long. So when you're just starting out your garden, especially as a beginner or even as a seasoned gardener, if you're establishing a new garden bed, fertilizers, very broad term, are going to be important. Whether you consider compost a fertilizer, whether you make that compost yourself, whether you buy that compost, whether the compost is organic or not organic, compost is kind of the first area of fertilizer. A lot of people, see it as a great option. Fertilizer can come with weed seeds. I experienced that pretty bad last year with some some compost that had a lot of weed seeds in it that I side dressed my plants with. And so and there's different ways you can use compost too. You can amend your beds with it. You can side dress plants with compost, and what that means is you just like put it around the plant or like at the base of the stem. And you can also put compost in the hole that you plant your transplant in. There's lots of ways to use compost, or really any fertilizer. So, compost. That is compost. The way I use compost in my gardens is I use compost to amend my beds. So what I'll do is I'll broad fork, and I will actually stick a gardening fork or like a pitchfork in the ground to aerate the soil, and then I'll spread my compost just so it has somewhere to go. Since I'm in Central Texas, Zone 8B, our soil tends to be slightly clay. So that's how I amend my beds with compost. I probably will not do what I did last year unless I use my own compost that I know doesn't have any weed seeds on it. I probably would not side dress my plants this year with compost because it potentially has weed seeds in it, and then you're just literally putting weed seeds right next to your plant's roots. Not great. So that's kind of the deal with compost. My thoughts on compost are it's great to amend beds with. It's great to put down in a hole when you transplant your plants. For me, putting anything compost related on top of already mulched garden beds, I haven't had a good experience with it. I'm sure if you made your own compost and you knew 100% it had no weed seeds in it, different story. But even if you do make your own compost and you're using like grass clippings, grass clippings have seeds in them. So that's kind of the deal with compost. I think as a beginner gardener, you don't need to be worried about if compost is considered hot. Sometimes compost would be considered hot. As it's breaking down, the temperature literally rises. And Charles Downing has really good videos about compost and temperature and all that stuff. If you're just buying bagged compost at the store, If you're a beginner gardener, especially if you're an urban gardener, you're probably not making your own compost. If you are, that's great. But you do want to make sure that your compost is not hot, because then it'll burn your plants. Like I said, if you're an urban gardener or a backyard gardener, you're probably just buying it bagged, and that's great. So that takes care of compost. Two other things that I use, and two other really kind of like categories of fertilizer, are liquid fertilizer and like a granule fertilizer. So I have both right here, I can show you. We'll start with the liquid fertilizer, and also this, I've had this fertilizer for at least a year and a half, so the bottle's a little sun bleached. But this is Fox Farm. This is called Grow Big, and this is a fertilizer that I use especially on seedlings. So this is not considered organic. I know, terrible. So my reason for using Fox Farm, a liquid fertilizer, this is also a really good fertilizer company, by the way. So this is concentrated fertilizer and nutrients that you mix with water, and you always want to dilute your liquid fertilizer, follow the package instructions, don't burn your plants. The reason I do this, I always use this to fertilize my seedlings, because that's just the way I choose to do things. I see really good results doing that. And then also, if a plant is struggling, I will give them this liquid fertilizer. Now, here's my diatribe on liquid fertilizers versus like natural and organic fertilizers. The plant doesn't know the difference between nitrogen that comes from the soil or nitrogen that comes from a concentrated, high quality liquid fertilizer. It just doesn't. It just knows it has food. So in an immediate fix situation, if my choice is to let my plant struggle and suffer, or if my choice is to give it liquid fertilizer, I'm gonna give it liquid fertilizer. That's definitely at the expense of being organic or whatever, but that's just what I choose to do. Soil health takes a really long time to build, and as somebody who has a community plot that I inherited that was 5 foot high with weeds, and my backyard, I am in a rental house, so this is not going to be a permanent situation. Yes, I'm investing as much as I can into the soil here, but I'm not here long term, and that's just kind of a reality. So with the mind frame that good soil health takes a long time to build, and sometimes you just need an immediate solution because your plants look crappy, that's where this guy comes into play. I literally just used this on some cucumber transplants that it was just hadn't been sunny for a few days. We're gonna have some sun. I felt like they just needed a little bit of a boost. So this is liquid fertilizer. Would I use something like Miracle-Gro? Probably not. I do have boundaries. So that takes care of liquid fertilizer. Again, I think if you're growing your own food, you have to think, if you're growing your own food, you're already being more sustainable because you are probably using less pesticides, you're growing it to its peak ripeness, which means it's got the most nutritional value. So even if you do choose to use like, you know, heavy fertilizers, and you only use liquid fertilizer, you are still being more sustainable by growing your own food in the first place. So I just think there's a lot of shame, as stupid as that sounds, I think there's a lot of shame around what people choose to use when they fertilize their gardens, which is kind of weird because I think there's like this like pinnacle of maximum sustainability and being organic, and we all want to be like the most organic, and like sometimes it's just not where I'm at. Sometimes I don't have time to save my eggshells for weeks and blend them with water and then dump them into the soil for added calcium. Sometimes I work full time. I have other things to do sometimes, and sometimes I do, and sometimes that's very important. So that is my spiel about liquid fertilizer. I always keep it on hand in case I need it. And honestly, I'm always pretty thankful when I have it because I can just use it real quick, and I can use it once, maybe twice, and get my plants looking much better and much healthier, much quicker. So that's that. This is organic granule fertilizer. So it'll always have a breakdown on the side of exactly what's in it. This is Espoma Organic Garden Tone. So this is organic. This is what it looks like. It's a little weird looking. Like granules. Granule fertilizer is what I choose to side dress my plants with. So great example, my bed of garlic. I planted that garlic in October. Garlic it overwinters. It takes like 9 months to grow. You're basically having a child. But my garlic really needed some fertilizer. So did my onions. This was very easy to just toss and water in really quick. It is organic, so that's good. This is what I will use for the majority of the season to fertilize, and I'll use it every couple of weeks or once a month, depending on how the plants are looking. You know, you can get a really good idea of how plants are doing based on how they look. A great example is I learned a lesson about squash, and I should have just direct sown all of my squash, but I didn't. I attempted to start my squash and then plant them out. Bad idea for me. It's warm enough here where I should have just direct sown them, and they look much paler than some starts that I bought at the store. I bought some zucchini starts here. Let's go look at them. This is a summer squash, this one and this one. They're growing very slowly. That one at least looks a little better. That one was tiny when I planted it. So does that one. But look at how deeply green these zucchini starts are that I bought. They're so green compared to these. So at least in my experience, your plants will tell you when they need fertilizer. They will look pale, they'll look kind of sick. You want your plants to be deep green, and you want them to kind of be like short and fat. I had somebody, I don't know if that's appropriate to say in 2021. I actually was listening to a YouTube video one time, and I don't remember who it was, but they said you want your small plants to be like babies, short and fat. Like that means they're healthy. I don't have babies, so I don't know that that's accurate, but for me, in my brain, it was a good analogy. You want your plants to be like, you know, very lush, even in their small stages. You would rather them grow slowly and be lush than grow fast and, you know, be leggy and somewhat pale and sick. So, that is everything I do for fertilizer. So just to kind of recap really quick, I amend my beds with compost before I mulch, and once I mulch over the soil and the compost, I do not put compost on top. I use high quality liquid fertilizer in emergency situations where my plants need to come back quickly. And I use an organic granule fertilizer to side dress my plants. And you know, if you really wanted to do this by the book, and I mean like really by the book, you would get what's called a soil test. So a soil test is something that your local agriculture extension office usually provides. I don't know if it's for free everywhere or if it's just for free in Texas because we have A&M. Not sure. But you can actually send them a soil sample and they'll test it and tell you what you're lacking in your soil, or you know what you have enough of. They'll basically give you an analysis. You can read the analysis and then you can fertilize just with what you're missing. So you can do that. I've never done that. I don't, It's not that I don't feel the need to, I guess I just haven't been in a permanent space long enough to where I feel like it's necessary, which I feel like is a bad, that's a bad gardening thing. But I just basically go by what the plant looks like. If your plant's really struggling, it's really easy to Google it. I mean, that sounds dumb, right? But like, it's really easy to Google it, or there's apps. There's an app called Picture This. I use that sometimes when I don't know what's going on. You can use that app called, again, it's called Picture This, and you can take a picture of an app and it'll kind of like compare the photos to photos online, and kind of give you an idea of what could be wrong with your plant. You can join a local gardening group and get some resources there. Reddit is a great resource to figure out what's going on with your plants. There are helpful people all over Reddit. So in terms of doing a soil test, I think it's a great thing to do if you're going to be somewhere for a long period of time, and you're building the soil health. For somebody like me who's a bit more of a backyard and urban gardener, none of my spaces that I have right now are permanent. My community garden plot, as much as I love it, will eventually one day be in somebody else's hands. This backyard will eventually one day be in somebody else's hands. So I'm not putting that much time investment into figuring out the soil. I'm just doing the best that I know how to help the soil grow plants. And I mean, I am building the soil to a certain degree. But that's my whole diatribe on fertilizer. I feel like I rambled a little bit, but it's kind of a complicated topic. Just don't overthink it, especially as a suburban and urban gardener. You're probably not turning piles of compost with your tractor, as cool as that would be. You're probably not having to take the temperature of your giant compost pile. So just do the best that you know how. Incorporate lots of different things. Try a lot of different things, and experiment. That's how I operate. So thanks so much for watching today, y'all, and happy gardening. We'll see you next time.